when you do this, do you have to tune the response too much of it? And I guess you'd exhaust and deplete the bone marrow and probably bad things would happen. Too little, it's not useful. How do you do that?
Yeah, great. It's a great question. So, we were made in a very nice way as human beings. In other words, the reason why, again, these are called stem cells is because they make themselves. So there is a limitless, non-limited supply of these hematopoietic stem cells because they're constantly making themselves. So you can, in fact, enter this world where giving some people are what we call super mobilizers, where they have a very high response to the cytokine, so that they have lots of stem cells. And these tend to be actually younger kids tend to mobilize stem cells more than adult patients do. And so oftentimes you can get into very high white blood cell counts because the cytokine, again, stimulates the cell to divide into white blood cells. So in that regard, Rich, you can kind of overdo the system by producing a higher white count. And there's a collection called an apheresis. It's a machine that looks like a dialysis machine where literally their blood is being extracted from the body, goes through this machine, spins, separates out the white blood cell layer, which has the hematopoietic stem cell, and returns the rest of the blood into the donor's body. So that's how we literally are collecting the hematopoietic stem cells, is through that apheresis process. So if you have too much of a high white count, then that throws off the process. But ultimately things work out and we're usually successful in terms of getting a good yield of these hematopoietic stem cells.
Yeah, but okay, can they make white and red cells or only red? I mean, only white.
They make all three. They make the white blood cells, which fight infection, the red blood cells, which carry oxygen, the platelets, which help us to stop bleeding.
What do their behavior is governed by what? What's in the blood? If you have high white cell count, they'll tend to make more red, or what will they do?
It's a great question. And again, it goes back to how we were created. So there is this regulation that occurs that you're alluding to, Rich. It's just like our gas tank, right? The indicator light goes low, so we know we have to get gas in order for the car to get to keep on going. Same thing with the bone marrow. It basically senses, which you're alluding to, if there's a low amount of red blood cells, patients who are anemic or bleeding, those hematopoietic stem cells kind of kick in and make more red blood cells than white cells or platelets. And those cytokines that I mentioned, the one that we use is something called GCSF. The G stands for granulocyte white blood cells, so that's why the white blood cells increase in the system. But there are other cytokines that are specific to literally kind of tapping the hematopoietic stem cell and saying, hey, I want you to make a red blood cell instead of a white blood cell, or a platelet instead of a red blood cell. So again, we're created in such to have these chemicals in our bloodstream to help regulate what the hematopoietic stem cell divides into.
But do you dope the surrounding blood, let's say with the right kind of cytokines, or maybe you draw blood from them earlier and then put back only the red cell component to create a high red cell environment, and preferentially make white if they have high white cell count to begin with? Like, what can you do to kind of game or coax the hematopoietic cells once they're liberated to make what you want?
Yeah. So now we're kind of getting into a really great field called cell therapy. But in order to kind of continue with this, we can, in fact, what are called leukopheresis patients. In other words, take off only their white blood cells, again, through that process of apheresis that I mentioned. We can, in fact, remove red blood cells through that process as well, or we can actually just, literally kind of drain those red blood cells if we needed to. And then usually we can't necessarily take off, we can take platelets as well. So in other words, the American Red Cross, great society, right? We all should go to the American Red Cross and donate blood. The American Red Cross can take whole blood from us. In other words, you sit in a chair, you give them your blood, and it goes into this big bag. Whole blood contains everything. That's the name whole blood. You can also give plasma, which contains the antibody layer and also some other chemicals, and you can actually be apheresed in order to get platelets as well. So you can, in fact, manipulate the blood and collect certain components of it based upon the techniques that I just mentioned. But for our purposes of hematopoietic stem cell transplant, we give the cytokine. It gooses or augments what naturally occurs in terms of the stem cell being emigrated out of the bone marrow into the bloodstream, and then we collect the stem cell through that apheresis procedure.